2 months after my wife Catherine's funeral, my son Daniel walked into my living room, looked around at the photographs on the walls, and said something that broke whatever was left of my heart. "Dad, we're selling your house." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I simply smiled and said, "I understand." What Daniel didn't know was that I had already packed my belongings. And more importantly, I had already made a decision that would change the future of everyone who thought my silence meant weakness. My name is Richard Hale, and for 38 years, Catherine was more than my wife. She was the person who knew every fear I had never spoken about, every mistake I regretted, and every dream I had quietly abandoned for my family. We built our little cottage together when we were young. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't luxurious, but every wall carried a memory. The kitchen still had the small scratch Catherine made while moving a table years ago. The hallway still smelled faintly of the lavender she loved. And beside our bedroom window stood the chair where she used to sit every evening with a cup of tea. Then cancer took her from me. After her funeral, the house became painfully quiet. People stopped visiting. The sympathy calls disappeared. And eventually, I was left alone with memories that were sometimes harder to live with than loneliness itself. Catherine had left me more than memories. She had left me the cottage and approximately $650,000 in savings and investments, but I never told Daniel the amount. Not because I wanted to hide money from my son. I simply wanted to know whether he still saw me as his father or as an opportunity. For years, Daniel had been different. He called when he needed help. He visited when there was something to gain. But when I needed him after his mother died, his visits became shorter and his excuses became longer. One afternoon, he arrived with his wife, Melissa. They sat across from me without even asking how I was doing. Daniel finally cleared his throat. "Dad, we've talked about this." I looked at him. "About what?" "The house." He said it casually, as if he were discussing an old piece of furniture. "We're selling it." My heart sank. "This is my home, Daniel." He sighed. "Dad, you're alone now. You don't need a place this big." Melissa added quietly, "You could move somewhere smaller." I looked around the room, at Catherine's photograph, at the old clock she bought on our 20th anniversary, at the family pictures. Then I looked back at my son, and something inside me became completely calm. I said only one sentence. "You're right." Daniel looked surprised. "You agree?" I smiled. "Yes." He thought he had won. He had no idea what I had already done. 3 weeks earlier, I had met with Catherine's attorney. Before she died, Catherine had insisted that everything we owned should remain protected and that our son should never be allowed to make decisions about my home while I was alive. The cottage was legally mine. The investments were mine. And I had already arranged a new home for myself in a quiet coastal town where Catherine and I had once dreamed of retiring. I had also established a carefully structured estate plan. Daniel would not inherit the money simply because he demanded it. He would receive what Catherine and I had intended for him, but only under the conditions we had legally documented. The rest would support a small community hospice and a scholarship fund in Catherine's name. I had not done it to punish my son. I had done it because Catherine had taught me something during our final months together. "Richard," she once whispered, "love your family, but never let love make you disappear." Those words stayed with me. The following morning, Daniel called again. "Dad, the realtor is coming Friday." I answered calmly, "There's no need." "What do you mean?" "The house isn't for sale." There was silence. Then he laughed nervously. "Dad, stop playing games." "I'm not." I told him the truth. The cottage was already transferred into a protected arrangement. The investment accounts had already been reorganized, and I had already moved most of my belongings. Daniel became furious. "You hid all this from me?" I looked at the packed boxes around my room. "No, Daniel. I protected myself." He didn't speak. For the first time in years, he had nothing to demand from me, nothing to threaten me with, nothing to take. A week later, I left the cottage. Before closing the door, I touched Catherine's favorite chair. I whispered, "I'm finally going somewhere peaceful." I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt sad, because revenge had never been what I wanted. I wanted my son to understand that his father was still a human being, not a house, not a bank account, not an inheritance, just a man who had spent his entire life loving his family. Months later, Daniel came to see me. He looked tired. He sat beside me without asking for anything. Then he said for words I never expected to hear, "I treated you terribly." I didn't immediately forgive him. Some wounds need time. But I reached across the table and held his hand. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's rebuilding your own life so completely that their approval is no longer necessary. I still miss Catherine every morning. But now, When I look at the ocean outside my window, I don't feel abandoned. I feel free. My son thought he was taking away my home. He never realized that I had already found another one. Not just another house. A life where my worth was no longer measured by what I owned. And that was the greatest lesson Catherine left me. Never confuse being loved with being used. And never be afraid to walk away from people who only remember your value when they need something from you.